Hey y'all, welcome to your first year of drum lessons, week 14, Drumset edition. My name is Penny Larson and I am really happy to have you with me today. If this is your first time here, I invite you to check out this whole playlist, your first year of drum lessons. If this is your first time joining this playlist, you might want to go back and pick up some of the lessons because a lot of what we're doing is cumulative and the lessons are building on each other. Likewise, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so that you can keep up with all of these videos. And it would be awesome if you hit that like button. So the other day on our drum pad lesson, we went over all of the rolls in our list of Percussive Arts Society 40 standard rudiments. And that was rudiments number 4 through 15, right? So we had the multiple bounce roll, the triple stroke roll, the double stroke open roll, and all of the different length variations of the double stroke open roll. And I warned you the other day that we were going to do pretty much all those rolls on the drum set. There is an endless way that we can apply the rolls to the drum set. So what I did for today was I tried to give examples of every roll in a beat, right? Recently in our drum set lesson, we did a fill that was based on the 6-stroke roll. And sure, rolls can be used in fills really obviously, right? But let's try and think about how we would use rolls in drum beats. And to facilitate that, in almost all of these examples, the bass drum is only going to be on 1 and 3. Sometimes it's only going to be on 1 in one of our examples, and it's going to play all 4 quarter notes in one of our examples. But besides that, it is only on 1 and 3. So usually I give you guys a view of my pedal so you can see what my foot's doing. Today we're not even going to do that. We're totally focusing on what our hands are doing. Our foot is just keeping time, okay? So we've got a handout like we do. This will be available down in the doobly-doo as a PDF. I have at least one example with all of the rolls, and a lot of the rolls have 2 examples. I haven't included a sticking pattern, so if you have any questions about sticking, you should refer to either previous videos or hopefully you just know what the sticking is for these rolls. So let's just jump into it. So we're going to start with, we're going to do the multiple bounce roll and the triple stroke roll last. Just because it made sense to me to get the double stroke rolls out of the way first. So first we've got a 5-stroke roll. We talked a little bit, let's touch really briefly. We talked a little bit the other day about how the drum pad reacts differently than the drums, right? Because, so this is a single ply coated snare drum head I've got. And on my tom, let's use the 12-inch tom just so we can kind of compare bounce. Got a medium-ish tuning on my snare drum, and this is the kind of bounce I get. Right? Pretty good, but nothing like the drum pad, right? On my tom, much less, right? So when I go to play a double stroke roll, I have to do a lot more work on the drum than I did on the pad. And if I want to do it on a tom, even more work, right? Toms honestly, if you play that many notes, because especially the way I have my toms tuned to be pretty oomy and just have a lot of body, double stroke rolls on toms are, you know, something I don't do all that often, but you want to be able to do it because there are definitely times when you're going to want that sound. And just because I have my toms tuned at the moment really boomy doesn't mean I always do. And when I have them tuned a little differently, they're still not super responsive for doubles. So you want to work on your doubles. I always have my students play doubles on the floor tom. Because that's how you really know whether you can make those notes or not. We'll talk about the triple stroke and the multiple bounce when we get there. But so that's the double stroke roll on the drums. Oh, and also on the hi-hat, we're going to do some double stroke roll patterns on the hi-hat. So let's talk really briefly about that. The bounce is different still, right? Okay. So working on all of these different surfaces, you're going to have to adjust your doubles technique a little bit. The more control you have with your fingers, the more you're going to be able to take it from one surface to the other, and it's not going to totally throw you off your game. Okay? All right. That's a lot of talking. Let's play. So number one, we're going to start out with a 5-stroke roll at the very end of the measure. And remember, a 5-stroke roll is a roll that's an 1/8 note long with a release on the next beat, right? And we can either play them on the beat or on the and. Both of the examples, we're going to do 2 examples, 1 and 2, and both of these examples we're going to play the 5-stroke roll starting on the and, leading into the beat, okay? And so number 1, I've got right at the end of the measure, I'm going to play the 4 and then the 5-stroke roll on the snare. Back to the 1. And as a beat, that sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And a little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, number 2 is different because I'm going to play the 5-stroke roll on the and after 1, but then I'm leading into the snare drum, right? In number 1, I was leading back to the hi-hat. Here I'm leading into the snare hit on 2. So I've got 1. So that sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And a little faster. 1 and 2, 3, 4. That one right, it's really difficult for me to not throw a bass drum in right after that snare. just to show you, it's not on your sheet, but just to show you what that might sound like, what I'm hearing in my head for this is more something like this. 2, 3, 4. Right, I really want to play after that snare accent on 2, I really want to play that and when I go back to the hi-hat on my bass drum. Okay, so number 3, we're going to do the 6-stroke roll, and we already did it as a fill. And I could certainly argue that this is a fill too, but we're going to try and see this more as part of the groove. So on beat 4, I'm just going to play a 6-stroke roll on the snare, and that's going to lead back into the hi-hat. Okay, so that sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It's important to remember with this one that on beat 4, we're going to start that roll with our right hand so that we're prepared to go back to the hi-hat with our right hand on beat 1. Let's try that one a little faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so in number 4, we're going to do a 7-stroke roll, and we're going to do it backwards, right? We're going to play, a 7-stroke roll is 3 doubles and then a release. But instead, I'm going to play the tap first. And that's going to be my beat 4. And then I'm going to play the 3 doubles back into the hi-hat on beat 1. So number 4 sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And a little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, number 5, we're going to do the 7-stroke roll the way it's written on our list of rudiments, but we're going to play it on the hi-hat. And I'm going to move the accent to the snare drum. So I'm going to have 2, 4, 6, 7. Okay. I'm not going to do a snare drum on beat 2. I'm going to play my snare drum accent on the after 1. So I'm going to have a little bit of a funky pattern. Also, I'm going to have to play, well, I'm not going to have to, but it made sense to me to play 16th notes on my hi-hat for the rest of this groove, just how this sounds. So we talked about 16th notes on the hi-hat last week. What did I say about stuff being cumulative, right? So now we'll use that alternating 16th note pattern on the hi-hat to fill out the rest of this groove. And that sounds like this. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And a little bit faster. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So number 6 is using the 9-stroke roll. I'm going to do the same kind of idea that we just did in number 5. I'm going to start the roll on the hi-hat and lead to the snare at the end of the roll, which for the 9-stroke roll is beat 2, right? 1 E and a 2, okay? But this one to me feels like it still makes sense to play 8th notes on the hi-hat, so for the rest of the beat I'm going to go back to 8th notes. And that sounds like this. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And a little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, number 7 is also a 9-stroke roll, but now it's on beat 4, and that is leading back into the next measure. So beat 4 is going to be a little bit unaccented. I'm not going to accent the beginning of the roll. I'm going to keep the 9-stroke roll with an accent at the end, so leading back into beat 1, I'm thinking of my accent. But because beat 4 is all roll, it's going to grab attention, okay? That sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And a little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 8 utilizes the 10-stroke roll. We're going to do something very similar to what we did in number 6 with the 9-stroke roll. We're going to play the roll, the doubles of the roll on the hi-hat. We're going to play the last 2 notes. Remember, the 10-stroke is 4 doubles and then 2 singles at the end, right? As 16th notes. So we're going to play the 4 doubles on the hi-hat and then the 2 singles on the snare. And then we're going to go on with 8th notes on the hi-hat back to our beat. So that sounds like this. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. And a little faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 9, the 11-stroke roll, we're going to go back to using our 16th note alternating pattern on the hi-hat. We're going to start out with the roll on the hi-hat, play that E, so the 11-stroke, remember, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So we're going to play that 11th note on the snare, so we're going to be a 16th note late. For our snare accent, we're going to be on the 2E, right? And then we're just going to continue with 16th notes alternating on the hi-hat. 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. And a little bit faster. 1, 2, 3 and a, 4 and a. Okay, so number 10 is the 13-stroke roll. What I decided to do for number 10 was to give us something approaching a train beat. We haven't really talked about train beats yet, but train beats are these things that happen in lots of blues, lots of country, lots of bluegrass, lots of Southern American music. It's nothing really all that different. New Orleans music too. It's nothing really all that different than, you know, typical drum beats. Drums keeping time, it's all of a piece, right? The biggest difference, we're gonna get like the 2-second train beat explanation just so you know what the heck is going on. The biggest difference is that the ride sound goes from the hi-hat to the snare drum. You've probably all heard beats like this, right? So very common is I'm going to play snare on 1 and I'm playing and as an accent, 1E and a. It's also very common to think of that as fast eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I usually, just in my brain, I tend to subdivide 1E and a, 2E and a, but it's very common to think of those as eighth notes as well. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Sometimes they have a little bit of a shuffle feel, which is a little bit of an uneven feel. We haven't talked about shuffles yet. We're going to get there in a couple weeks. But sometimes they'll have a little bit of a lope, not be perfectly even notes. Don't worry about that for right now. So we're going to play this 13-stroke roll, which remember is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. So we've got an accent on the and. And so what I'm going to do is play quarter notes with the bass drum and then keep playing 16th notes on the snare and keep that eighth note accent going. So that sounds like this. 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. and a little bit faster. 1, 2, 3, and a 4, and a. I want to make it clear, this is pretty atypical of what you would see in a train beat, that long roll like that. Although, it's not completely unheard of, but that's not a typical train beat, but it's related, right? I'm trying to give you just some building blocks with these rolls to get your creative juices thinking. It's, like I say, it's really easy to apply the rolls to fills. That sort of comes naturally. I wanted to get you thinking about ways that we can use them in grooves too, right? There's literally an unlimited way that we can use these rolls. Okay, so next, the 15-stroke roll. We're going to go back to our 16th note pattern. We're going to extend the roll all the way to the after 2, right? That's our 15-stroke roll. And then just continue with the alternating 16th notes. And that sounds like this. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. And a little faster. 1, 2, 3, and a 4, and a. Okay, and lastly for the double stroke rolls, number 12, we've got the 17-stroke roll, which is 2 full beats. The thing that made the most sense to me was just to play the roll with the bass drum on 1, the snare drum lands on 3. This is kind of like a nice, just halftime feel. Really, I'm just playing the roll in 4/4 time. You could kind of say, oh, Penny, this is a cop-out. But I really kind of feel like with the bass drum on 1 and the accent on 3, depending on what else is going on in the music, this is a totally acceptable thing to do as a timekeeping device. Especially when I play it slow, it might feel like, when is this ever going to end? But when I play it a little bit quicker, and you can really start to hear that 1, 3, 1, 3, I think you'll see it as a legitimate timekeeping drum beat, drum groove kind of thing. So let's do it slow first. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Okay, a little bit faster. I'm going to see if I can go a bit faster and really make it sound like it actually is something without quite so much space. 1, 2, 3, 4. That one might work better if I added some hi-hats on the quarter note or did something else, but I really wanted to keep today very simplistic in terms of what else is going on besides the rolls. So fine, shoot me. The 17-stroke roll might be a little bit of a cop-out. It's tough to include that as a groove. Okay, so next, triple stroke roll. We're kind of going backwards. We'll get to the multiple bounce roll last. Triple stroke roll, we talked about the other day. It's very important to me that when you're going to play the triple stroke roll, you keep your threes as articulate threes, right? So if I play them on the snare, right, if I go too much faster than that, they're going to mush out and become a multiple bounce roll. Same thing, I'm going to do two examples where I'm doing them on the hi-hat. And same thing on the hi-hat, right? If I'm not careful, these can really easily turn into, right? Nobody wants that. That's not a triple stroke roll, that's mush, okay? There's a lot of things you can do with drumsticks controlling the bounce. The triple stroke roll to me really aren't one of those things. The triple stroke roll is about 3 even notes, and you're never going to get that with a big note and trying to control the bounce. You've got to make all 3 notes with your fingers. Easing my way off my pedestal. So we're going to do 2 beats that are almost the same. The second beat, as I was working these up, the second one, I just thought, oh, I'll do that one just to be a silly brat. So number 13, I'm going to play triple for the first beat, and then I'm going to play my right hand on the snare, and I'm going to leave the rest of that 8th note empty and play the second 8th note of beat 2 as a triple on the hi-hat. So that sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And now a little faster. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Okay, so like I said, while I was working these up and I was playing that, I realized, hey, it would be super snotty if I did a triple, and then after I play the snare, jump right back onto the hi-hat, so I'm continuously playing the triple stroke roll. I'm just moving that one note to the snare. And this is number 14, and this sounds like this. Let's do this nice and slow at first. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And let's be silly, let's go even a little bit faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, like I say, that's kind of me being a brat. That's kind of goofy. I don't know that I would ever play anything exactly like that, but I've totally used that element where I need to get from the snare drum quickly back to the hi-hat. And this is a great way to force yourself to do that. Okay. So number 15 and 16 are all about the buzz roll. The reality is when I use the multiple bounce roll, I hear that timpanist in my head every time I say buzz roll. If you missed the story from the other day, it's not a long story, but I had a timpanist yell at me for calling multiple bounce rolls buzz rolls. Anyway, usually when I use this multiple bounce technique, it's going to be as a very short drag, right? A press as some sort of in between, in the fills, filling stuff up, right? I'm not usually going to do an extended multiple bounce roll as part of a groove, okay? But here are a couple ways where you might do that. So number 15, I'm going to play a quarter note multiple bounce roll and then beat 2, and then I'm going to continue on with my 8th note groove as normal. Just to talk a little bit, we talked about multiple bounce rolls on the pad and how they sound on the snare. So, and we talked about the bounce at the beginning of the lesson, but so you can hear the difference, right, between the pad the other day and now the snare drum. The drum gives you a lot more. In some ways, it's harder to get that initial buzz technique going on the snare drum, but once you get it, the drum gives you a lot more freedom, a more cushion, right? The drum will work with you more than the pad. The pad, it's all about you. You can either play it or you can't. Whereas the drum, it's more like a partnership between you and the drum, making the drum sing, right? Okay, so number 15 is going to sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You can hear the articulations a little bit more than I'd like because I'm playing the articulations as 16th notes, right? 1 E and a 2, buzz, 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 bop, which when we get faster is gonna be the sound I want. Slower, not as much, right? You're hearing that buzz, 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 bop. So let's try it a little faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, and see how the rolls were a little smoother there, right? The last one, number 16, we're gonna do a buzz roll, a multiple bounce roll. I should edit those out. A multiple bounce roll for 2 beats at the end. And this really is kind of a fill, right? You can sort of give me grief about this not really being part of the beat. This is a 2-beat fill. But this is a way that I might actually use a multiple bounce roll in a groove. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. and a little bit faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, whew, that's a lot of different ways to apply a lot of different rolls to some drum grooves, right? Really simple though, right? We kept our feet super simple for the day, making our hands kind of go crazy. And again, so I definitely recommend going back to Wednesday's lesson to review these rolls if you have any questions. Also, a few years ago, I did a series called A Rudiment a Day, where I went through all the rudiments, and they're short, they're like couple minute videos, but I talk about each of the rolls, and you know, how much can you say about an 11 stroke roll versus a 13 stroke roll, really, but I talk about them all, just play them so you can hear how they sound, get them in your head. So if you're having trouble hearing how they work in these beats, don't be afraid to go back and look at that. Make sure you're counting these rolls, make sure you're playing the stickings right. Refer to the Percussive Arts Society Rudiment sheet that I'll also link down below. And then experiment, right? Like the thing about the rolls, I mean, really everything on the drum set, but the rolls, oh my God, there's literally so much you can do once you start, you know, moving things around a little bit. If we're keeping things as a beat, well, if I'm playing right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, what if I play the right, right on the ride cymbal, right? So there's just a million ways that you can mess around with these things. That's going to do it for today's lesson. All about all the rolls, right? Wow. Lots of rolls. So I hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you next week when we talk about, on the drum set lesson, we talk about how to play some of these roll patterns between the hands and feet. And if there's a million ways to do them just with your hands, once you start including other limbs, oh my goodness, right? So I hope y'all have a nice weekend. I hope y'all are getting to practice, staying sane, staying safe, right? Be safe, y'all. And I will see you all soon. All right, keep practicing. I love you guys very much. Take care. Bye.